Welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival, the online festival that asks the question, what if we could redesign everything? My name is Kinge and I'll be your host for today. Today we're going to talk about open source, together with Seigo Robinson, a circular economy consultant, and Lars Zimmermann, who is artist and economist. A few questions that will be asked during this session are, how can opening up generate value? How do we engage in a collaborative economy without giving up ownership? And how can assets be leveraged to engage and interact with more people? Please remember, this is an interactive session, so post all your questions, your comments in the discussion box below this video, or tweet using the hashtag ThinkDiff. That's it for me now. I'll hand it over to you, Seigo.
Hi, Seigo Robinson from Social Circular Economy. We enable circular economy through working with social enterprises. I'm also on the board of stewards for Open Source Circular Economy Days, which I guess is the main driver for this session. And I'm joined here by Lars, who's a founder. Lars, a few words.
Yeah, I'm based in Berlin. My name is Lars Zimmermann, and I explore open source for circularity for many years now as an artist and economist. And I'm also, like Seigo, part of the board of stewardship of the Open Source Circular Economy Days. Okay, Seigo, your turn to start our talk.
Sure. So just a couple of words on Open Source Circular Economy Days. It started a couple of years ago, and effectively it's a series of hackathons that go around the globe. It's actually now more of a platform that's used more continuously, and we're currently looking at a strategy review to really focus on impact going forward. Effectively, what it espouses is using open source to enable circular economy solutions, and then put those solutions for everyone to be able to use around the world. So just in the last couple of years, there's been over 100 locations across the world, with cities across the world practicing circular economy ideas and working in maker labs, etc., to pursue interesting circular economy solutions. I think I can now hand over to Lars, who can give you a little bit more insight into open source, especially as it pertains to circular economy.
Yeah, that's the big question or thesis of the Open Source Circular Economy Days, that open source might be the key to the circular economy. Maybe the best option we have if we really want to make the whole economy circular, because first of all, open source enables transparency. Open source is really about giving away how your products are made. And it builds on this a distributed form of collaboration. And to understand, and this is what our session is about, how to start open source with open source in your business, you have to understand that it's best to do really open source from the start. It works not very often that you develop your product first and then make an put an open license on it and share the building plans. It's very good to really start with the open source mindset. So maybe to explain you a little bit why open source makes really sense in the realm of circular economy. So open source giving away the building plans versus you have a great building plan, but you keep it protected. We already shared this example in the first DIF 2015, but I want to explain it again. I saw a talk from a person, and they developed 100% recyclable underwear made from a technical material. It's a factory based in Switzerland. And at the end of his presentation, the guy said, "Isn't that perfect? And if you don't need the underwear anymore, put it in a brown envelope and send it back to us, to Switzerland, because we know how to recycle that material and use it for new underwear." And when I mention this example, usually half of the audience laughs because it's a really strange infrastructure idea. First of all, we live in a globalized world. Maybe you buy the underwear in Switzerland and you wear it in Africa and you throw it away in China. Are you supposed to send it from China to Switzerland? The second thing, the average Western person owns 10,000 things. Are we supposed to put all of them into little envelopes and send them across the globe? And why this example with the underwear is so great is because especially women really have a problem with the idea to send their 10-year-old underwear in a brown envelope to some strange guy in Switzerland. So you have this whole privacy issue on top. So as an infrastructure idea, brown envelopes are a really absurd idea. Now imagine that the underwear would be open source. So this would mean wherever it ends up as trash, the people could analyze it, find the resources online, see, that's the material that's used there, and that's the proper way to recycle it. So it could be recycled wherever the underwear ends up as trash. So since the internet is around, you have seen this graph a lot. It shows different forms of networks. And on the right, that's the network we need to enable a circular economy. It's a distributed network where all nodes have all knowledge and all opportunities and all possibilities. And that distributed network is best enabled with open source. So just a quick reminder what open source means. I brought you the definition of open source hardware, which is basically a mirror of the definition of open source software. Open source hardware is hardware whose design is made publicly available so that anyone can study, modify, distribute, make, and sell the design or hardware based on that design. So it's really important to understand that you also allow the commercial use of your designs. Then you can call it open source. And as you probably all know, open source is in the world of software incredibly successful. We all are using open source on a daily basis because it's what's the internet, what the back side of the internet, so the servers and so on. All of this runs on open source. There are people saying without open source, the internet would be where it was 15 years ago or maybe 10 years ago. So through open source, we had a much faster development. And yeah, open source makes the world of software run, and there are people in hardware catching up with this development. But the first question you always get when you talk about open source is how to make business with open source. And so we got a little bit tired of this question, and we created an online course, which you can find under this behind this URL, ocedays.org/be1. And it's a full video series and a long text that explains that starts with a lot of examples of successful open source companies and then gives you a very simple tool which looks like this. It's a simplified version of the business model canvas you probably are all familiar with. And this is more like an educational tool that really helps you to understand the 2 or 3 key questions you have to ask yourself when you want to understand how you could run your business as an open source business. And we want to go with you through that little canvas, explaining it with 2 examples. The first one is really, really easy. And the second one is then IKEA, which allows you to see a little bit more and more sophisticated ways what open source what kind of opportunities come with open source. So let's go through this little example, and our example is a carpentry. So a workshop that produces desks. And you can see the canvas has 6 squares, and each square asks 1 question. And the first square is about all the assets you have in your company. And then you ask about each asset. If I open this up, what will happen in all the other squares in the canvas? And by that, you will discover slowly an ecosystem. You will see what kind of opportunities emerge if you open up that asset. And I will have 3 little stories here. I will quickly tell you. So the first asset is, of course, the desk. You manufacture the desk. That's the traditional asset. And then you give it away. The second square then asks about the roles and actions you enable by doing that. So what can people do if you give them this asset? If you just give away the desk as a product, you enable the roles of consumers, people who just buy the desks, and resellers, people that resell the desks for you. The third square of our canvas then asks the question, what kind of benefits do you have from opening up that asset? And for our traditional road of selling the desk, then of course your benefit is that you sell the desks and make an income. The fourth square asks about the benefits of the network. So what are the advantages other people have when you open up this asset? And of course, with our traditional road that you sell the desks, the network benefits are that people can buy and use desks, or that people can resell the desks and make a living, make a business with it. And then the fifth square is called channels for exchange. So in a network, things are exchanged. This might be knowledge, this might be opportunities, but this is first and foremost also products. And then you have really to find out through which channels are the products or is the money exchanged, so you can make sure these channels are there. And for our traditional road that you give away the desks, of course, the channel you need is a shop where people can go, see the desk, and then buy it. The shop is the place where you get around the tables. And then the last square is where you ask yourself what kind of value is created with that, and how can you benefit from that in terms of income? How can you make money with it? And with our traditional road, where you sell the desks, of course, you make money by selling the desks. So that's the traditional route. Now let's look what happens if in square one, in the assets, I also open up my building plan of the desk. Then you can see in square number 2, you enable new roles. For example, you enable the roles of teachers who can use your design in their classes to teach their students how to make desks or design them. And you open up the roles of designers or innovators who innovatively work with your design, improve it, and so on. So it's a new actors become part of the whole thing. Then you can ask yourself, from these new actors, what benefits do you have? Of course, you have open innovation. Maybe some of these teachers or designers has a great idea, shares it online, and then you can implement it right away into your initial desk design. And you get a lot of marketing and attention. When people openly discuss and share your designs because they play with them, they love them, then it's always good for your brand. And this is something I forgot to mention. It's many people don't understand that in open source, you give away how things are made. But what is still protected always is your brand name. So let's say in this example, the company would be, the name would be Desk, let's say, and Desk would be protected as a trademark. Then no one else could give away these open desks under the name Desks. I hope this is clear. So trademarks are still protected. So, but let's have a look. If you give away the building plans, what benefits has the network from this? Of course, people can then create new designs and they can manufacture the desks and they can sell them, so they can make an income. And this is really important to understand here. If you have some actors in mind or some roles you want to enable by opening something up, why should people do that? What's the motivation for them to really spend a lot of time? And it's no secret that we spend most of our time with jobs, so we have to make an income for us. So if you enable commercial use of your open assets, then they are able to really spend a lot of time and really contribute something to the whole ecosystem, to the whole network. Okay, what is another benefit the network has from opening up the building plans is, of course, education. They can learn something. Then let's go to the channels. What kind of channels are needed to really share around the building plans and facilitate the whole open innovation processes and so on? And this is, of course, you could use a website. This could be your own website or maybe someone else's website. Or you can use a forum. So for example, a lot of open source communication happens in forums. So someone has a problem, asks a question, someone else answers this question, and that's how the knowledge ends up in the web. And if you have the same question, you Google it, and then you find this forum thread, and you can access the solution. And with this forum, for example, it's to understand, is this forum yours? Or is it maybe the forum of someone else? For example, if you try to build an open source worm composter, there are a lot of forums on worm composting already out there. Maybe you can just use these. Okay, and what's the value extraction? Where can you make income? From giving away the building plan, maybe you have some workshops or classes you teach in your workshop, and then you can sell tickets to these trainings where people learn to work with your building plan. So I think you get the general idea. I will just share one more example. Let's say you have, as another asset in your company, you have a workshop, the place, the factory where you manufacture things. And if you open this up, what kind of roles do you enable? You enable the roles of DIY or hobbyists that want to build something sophisticated, but they don't have access to the machines, but they can maybe come every Wednesday to your workshop and play with the machines and manufacture what they want. What's the benefit for you from that? Of course, you get a new network, you get new people, a new community, new knowledge. And what's the benefit for them? It's the same benefit. They also get a new network, a new community, and new knowledge. Very often the benefits for you are the same as for the network. For example, if the whole open ecosystem enables a much better product, then you benefit as the person or factory who produces it, as well as the community and the ecosystem that has a much better, much richer product to use. Okay, what is the channel for opening up the workshop? Of course, it's the workshop space itself. And it could be trainings, so workshops where, let's say, teach people how to use the machines and so on. And what's an income source if you do that? Of course, again, you have the tickets for the trainings, and you could take usage fees for the tools, for example. So you see, this is a very, very simple example that is just meant to explain the canvas that you can find online with much more extended explanations. But Seigo will now guide you through another example where he used the canvas to explain IKEA as an open source company. Okay, Seigo, it's your part.
Great. Okay, this looks a little complicated, eh? Right, so I guess, sorry, you can hear me, yeah. So I guess what I'd say here is the first couple of rounds is going to be relatively similar to what Lars mentioned, but then we start to add other assets that look rather interesting. So going back to the previous canvas, we had the desk. Now imagine you open that desk up to a whole suite of products. So IKEA will have all its products, its furniture, etc. That will be the open asset. Going beyond that, what are the roles that that enables? We talk about the customers, so obviously for the products, but actually there's also a piece around resellers. We don't really know of any third-party resellers that are currently selling new IKEA products, but certainly they're available in second-hand stores, etc. And in some stores, I think, certainly in Sweden, IKEA actually enable this second-hand market themselves. Going further, so sticking along with the yellow boxes, in terms of what are the benefits for IKEA, we have them selling their products, of course. And then similarly, the network benefits is to be able to do this buy, resell products, etc. The customers, etc., can benefit from that. Then the channels, we go to the yellow box there. So we have obviously IKEA famous for their big flagship stores, effectively the same, the same proxy for what Lars said as selling a desk in a shop. They also have that kind of online platform. And obviously that the value extraction piece is very purely financial, and it's around selling products. So now we can start to think, okay, well, that's the current business profile of IKEA, if you like. Now, if we start to add on these assets, let's think about their product designs. What if IKEA were to open up their designs of certainly their products, but potentially, not just their furniture, but their wider suite of products. So we can imagine that they release their products on some kind of platform, and it, similarly to the desk example, will enable certain roles. So looking to the orange tags in the roles section, we've got designers and innovators and teachers doing a similar thing to, again, the desk example. So these are people that want to modify, upgrade. They could even make art. Educators may want to engage students with real-life products. It's much more interesting for a teacher to say, look, here's IKEA's products. Let's play with that in a kind of engineering design student course, for example. So how would IKEA benefit from doing that? Well, there's going to be open innovation, right? Others will be innovating around those products. And particularly good innovations will presumably start to gather a following, and then IKEA can go, I see, that's really useful information. And similarly, you get this marketing and attention piece that we were talking to earlier. So if a teacher said, let's use IKEA products, then you start to build a whole cohort of students who have IKEA as the brand in their minds. So going to the network's benefits, so how do those enabled roles benefit? Obviously, they get to create and potentially even sell the designs that they modify or use from IKEA's open designs. And also there's this whole societal benefit of kind of education. How would you enable this? Well, you have a channel of a website, similar to what Lars was saying, and then the final piece around the orange is the value extraction piece is loyal customers. And this isn't something that's often thought of clearly, but loyal customers means two very specific things. There's a piece around lower customer acquisition costs, which is a very key metric for corporates. And also there's the lifetime value of a customer. So if you've got someone locked in from an early age, especially if you're educating them, that's a great thing for a brand, right? Right, so let's go back to the assets box and let's think, what else can we open up? The next one, which we find particularly interesting, is packaging designs. Instead of just the products, we can think about packaging design being opened up. And what are the roles that might be enabled? Well, packaging providers might see the designs that IKEA have got and start to modify and play with those. So the benefits that IKEA would have, it would be these reduced innovation costs around packaging. So perhaps, you know, they're very interesting, durable packaging, or on the flip side, it might be interesting lightweighting going on in terms of the packaging. If we think about the network benefits, so i.e. the packaging providers, how do they benefit? Well, actually, if they start to produce something that's rather interesting in terms of being low cost or being more sustainable, etc., that might be very interesting for IKEA to start procuring for them. Excuse me. So yeah, there might be an opportunity for these manufacturers to actually start selling to IKEA and the wider network of organizations that need packaging, which is almost every product-oriented organization. So going to channels, what would that be? What would that look like? Well, again, it would be probably a website so that the designs are available. And then finally, the value extraction piece. So for IKEA, it's this kind of cheaper, standardized packaging. And we think it's particularly interesting because it's a non-core part of a business that sells products, right? Packaging you need, but it's not something that's particularly frightening to release in terms of knowledge. And actually, there's potential benefits coming through. So we really think for product-oriented organizations, some form of open sourcing of packaging really makes sense. Right, so the next asset we can jump to is stores. This is a little like what Lars was saying around the workshop for the desk example. So if we think about, you know, all them big IKEA mega stores, perhaps they could start to open up, you know, maker spaces in those stores and allow just a different community to start interacting. So those are the roles. We're thinking about customers thinking, oh, I really like that wardrobe, but maybe I can have a different handle on it. Can have very design-focused people or just general innovators really starting to interact in a different way just by opening up that part of the asset. So what are the benefits for IKEA for doing this? Well, you start to get this kind of interesting new network of communities of not just customers, but designers and innovators. And actually, there's actually already a group like that called IKEA Hackers. There's a whole website around people hacking IKEA furniture. So there's already something there, but this is something that they could even piggyback off of, and effectively they will become brand advocates. So network benefits, how do those new enabled roles benefit? We could think about these like-minded people who want to pursue interests and start to build interesting projects. And you know, these are probably hobbyists on the whole, so you start to have interesting engagements with different designs and whatnot. So finally, going to the channels for the blue lot. Actually, there's quite a few things you could do. You could have a workshop space. You could have the ways of interacting, which might be through a website or in-store or trainings. So there's a whole bunch of things that could come through there. And then how do you extract the value from those those participants? Well, you'll get loyal customers because they're not just engaging with a product anymore. They're really engaging with something that's much more meaningful and personalized to them. And that's something that sometimes IKEA is not is slightly criticized for, because it's rather standardized and everybody has IKEA furniture. But imagine if everyone could mod it, that will start to really bring in interesting benefits. And then there's other ways of extracting value from this. So think about selling tickets to events, much like what Lars already presented. And there might be even subscriptions. So if people are heavy users of a makerspace within an IKEA store, maybe they can have a kind of a premium service where they effectively can come anytime and play with whatever, a 3D printer, for example. Okay, so jumping finally back to the opening up assets box, we go to logistics. This is the final one, so the green one. So what does that do in terms of opening up the logistics, in terms of what kind of roles does it enable? Maybe just to be specific on the opening up of the asset, you can think about trucks going one way fully loaded, but returning rather empty. So there's an opportunity to open this kind of information of, oh, well, we got empty trucks going back. What can people do with it? So what are the roles? It's effectively freight that could be utilizing that extra, in some ways, waste space in freight. So how can IKEA benefit from that? Well, more effective logistics, right? So they can have higher utilization of logistics, and perhaps be seen as an enabler of the reverse logistics, which is something that underpins circular economy. So if products need to go back, people can use that extra space because they know that extra space is available at a certain time and a certain amount. So moving to the network benefits, how do people who want to move things about benefit? Well, of course, they have access to freight infrastructure. In some ways, it might even be cheaper for them because it's this effective wasted utilization of freight. So really going along with the kind of circular economy idea of increasing utilization of assets. And then finally, we go to the channel. I think relatively obvious, you probably need some kind of platform, but obviously you need the physical asset around the trucks. So you need to know that kind of open live freight data, or at least spare capacity therein. And maybe people can start to bid or coordinate or integrate their freight within these trucks. And then obviously the most important part probably for thinking about this is the value extraction piece. So how does IKEA benefit? Of course, if you're making available a freight option, then they can definitely sell that freight capacity, and in a quite a distributed way. So hopefully, I know that was a quick rush through things, but you can start to see the more you think about an organization, you start to pull out some of those assets, and there's a lot of different things you can do when you start to open up. So I think I'll hand back to Lars right now, who will wrap up.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say, all of you, what you have seen right now, imagine to combine this with circularity, and I think you are really onto something, or you are on the road to something new. And something I forgot to mention with the canvas is that you can use it to map out your product or company as an open source company. That doesn't mean that you will find a solution that works. Maybe you find out, okay, for me, it's too risky with that particular asset to go the open source road. That's always an opportunity. I don't think that everything works at the moment as fully open source solution. But if you're really creative and use the canvas for a while and study the examples, then maybe you will find a way to have it open source anyway. And there are a lot of smart people in the world who can help you to understand open source business models much better. It's Seigo and I and our other colleagues are there. But there's also a guy called Simone Cicero. He developed a toolkit like the one you just saw, but much more sophisticated and really capable to remap a whole business as a platform. Then there's someone called Diederik van Wingerden. He's available in the Netherlands. Then the Danish Design Center is really interested in open source business models. They have a huge project called the Remodel Project, and they're really happy to help you, and they are creating resources you can use. Then there's Jaime Arredondo in France, who's really good at explaining open source business models and helping startups and companies to understand how to use this approach. Then Benjamin Tink and the whole WeShare network, and also Paul Bristow, who's based in the Fab Lab in Geneva, who is really experienced with open source approaches also in large companies. And there are much more if you Google them, and we really encourage you reach out to these people and let them help you to really find the circular economy that works with open source.
Thanks, guys. So, that was very interesting. I think we can go to a Q&A now. We've already had some great questions coming in for everybody viewing. There is still time to ask your questions. You can put them in the comment box below this video or use Twitter, #ThinkDiff. And one of the first questions that I would like to ask is a bit of a bigger question, and it is, can we open source absolutely everything?
Do you? Yeah, as I said, maybe, but we don't know yet. I mean, there's a lot of work to do in the world of open source business models, and maybe we will find something where we say, okay, that really will not work as open source. Then we might ask ourselves, do we really need that? And if the answer is yes, then the answer to your question is no, we can't make everything open source. But I think we can make much more things open source than we expect at the moment, just because we aren't so used to open source things. It's relatively new, this approach, and a lot to learn and a lot to discover.
And what do you think if we say we cannot make everything open source, and we shouldn't aim to make everything open source, but by having a look at what we can make open source and what would be very suitable for that, is that a start? And yeah, what do you think about that?
Do you want Seigo?
Yeah, sure. I think is somewhat echoing what Lars just said. I think there's so much that can be more open, and yeah, we advocate open source, but even just being a bit more open access or whatnot is a good thing. I think a lot of this has to do with information flows. Yeah, I see circular economy as obviously being a set of flows, but typically it's money flows, it's information flows, it's material flows, it's resource energy type flows, right? And all those things can be better redirected when information is freer, if that makes sense. So in terms of are there things we can't open source? I'm not sure that's important right now. I think we're just scratching at the surface, and we've got so much more that will enable circular economy when we start connecting that kind of information flows. Did I answer the question correctly? Was that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good to not look at the perspective of what we like in the end of if we are there and making everything, but look at the bits that we can make open source right now.
Can I?
And we have another question coming in from Elisa. She asked, you're talking about generating value by opening up, but what kind of value are you talking about? Money value, or can we also measure in additional values like social value?
I'll be happy to take that. So yeah, I operate a social circular economy as an organization, and that really does focus on connecting social impact, effectively social enterprises, with circular economy, because actually I see circular economy as an excellent paradigm, but actually it can have the leakage of not always focusing on social value, and it basically allows economy and environment to be optimized. Now, social enterprise actually does the economy and the social, but actually can hurt the environment. When you combine all three, then you can have social, environmental, and economic value. So circular economy is, it does those two lenses extremely well. But from my perspective, when I use that open canvas, I definitely think about value in those three terms. And in this case, I think we did focus quite a lot on the economic measures, just because it's the easiest currency that we know of. But I think we did touch on communities, and without communities, things don't happen. So those social value elements are absolutely key. So definitely applaud the pushing of that angle.
And is there also some way that it can be more tangible, the social value? Because money value, as you just said, is incredibly, the economic part of it is really tangible, but the social part of it, not that. What's your view on that?
It's not as easy. No, it's very easy to come up with a dollar value or a pound value or euro value. That's what we're all used to. How do you measure social impact? There's a whole industry around measuring social impact. But of course, there are ways to have decent proxies, but it's a much harder thing to do right. So no, it's not as easy, and that's why everyone always falls back on the easy piece, right? But that's the challenge for us as we go forward with the circular economy, is to actually really integrate the kind of social aspects too, not just socioeconomic pieces around kind of, are we creating more jobs? It's about, are we creating the right jobs? Are we creating jobs for people who are more marginalized? Are we allowing equal opportunities for people? So it's all those thoughts that need to be put in place.
Lars, do you have some other thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe it's too philosophical, but I would say right now we are surrounded by black boxes. So you can't really see what's in them and how are they made and how you can recycle them. And one of the big problems with the circular economy is really how can we explain this to a broader audience, let's say, to more people, make it really something that's so obvious and everyone can really plug into and interact to. And I really like this idea of the MacGyverization. You have MacGyver is this famous TV hacker, and he gets into trouble, and then he knows everything about everything around him, and then he uses this knowledge to really solve his problems. So for him, all the opportunities are transparent. And the circular economy is basically a world where you are surrounded by opportunities to recreate what is there into something new. And now imagine this is really transparent. So everyone can basically look it up online and learn this. So you are surrounded by an environment that invites you to co-create this. This might be a complete different environment where children already intuitively learn, hey, this is how I creatively build circles and I reuse things and don't throw them away into the trash. I think this kind of new connection to the world built on transparency, that could be really interesting.
And I like it that you mentioned that, and with that future vision together, because we have another question coming up from Laura S. And she asks, what kind of resources do we need to enable the open source and the information flow of it?
Maybe I don't really get what she means with resources.
Right, I can interpret it a little. So you just mentioned your vision on the opportunities that we have if we open everything up, if we get outside of this black box and open things up. But what kind of resources do we need? Certain platforms to convey this information to be open source?
Yeah, great question. I will answer it in a minute, but deploy first another bit that is really important to understand what we are talking about. I mean, we are talking here about the circular economy in the context of the Disruptive Innovation Festival, and everyone knows that for that we have to reinvent most, if not everything, most things, if not everything. And we say, when we do this, then let's invent it as open source right away, because I said it will not work for the majority of products if you just change the license and publish the building plan. A product has to design to work as an open source product also business-wise. It has to be created as an open platform that enables a lot of other actors. And so if we recreate things circular, then let's recreate them open source at the same moment, because at least in theory, it looks much more like then we will be successful. And the question is, how does open source, how does it happen? Usually people think open source means that you create something and then you create a beautiful tutorial with images and little descriptions and put this online. But this happens, but this is only a small part of where open source really is. Much larger part is what I already mentioned, is forums. So you have a place where people can go to and ask questions, and then someone else answers these questions, and that's how the knowledge ends up in the web. Especially in the world of code, if you have a problem, coders Google all the time, and there are all these pieces of codes you can copy immediately and use it and so on. That's way much more important. So have these open platforms where people are encouraged to ask questions and where someone is there to answer these questions. And the third part about open source is right now we all work in little teams. And in these teams, we share resources. So let's say we create together documents, and then every member of the team has access to this document and can edit it and so on. And maybe you write emails, or maybe you use a Slack channel, or whatever you use. And open source teams basically do the same, but their tools, they're working in the public. So it's not in a hidden forum, chat, for example, but it's out on a forum. Or the chat is visible. Or the documents they work on, they are in the world of software, they are on GitHub. So everyone can see the document, see how it progresses, see the contributions, study it, download it, modify it, and propose own contributions to the whole code base. So basically your teamwork, but out in the open. This is open source, and this will give you so many new opportunities and so many possibilities you don't have when you do your teamwork closed source.
Just to quickly add, in terms of very specific kind of tools, I mean, certainly OSDC Days, the website is, what we're trying at least to use as that platform. So, it's the first place to go if you're interested in this stuff and actually trying to look for some circular solutions. So we would invite you to go to that. But beyond that, I think, yes, there's these forums piece, but actually there's also something interesting around. There's a lot of talk about secondary resource material marketplaces, if you like. It's almost like a clearinghouse. So someone's got a waste and someone else sees that as a nutrient. How do we know that those people, if it's an open platform that people could just quickly say, oh, I've got this waste, can anyone take it from me? Someone else says it, and it could be at a distributed level, so it's only 5 kilometers away. That's how you start to enable what Lars is talking about, is this whole environment of things around you to actually start using that rather than digging it up in China and then adding value to it in America, et cetera, right? So those are the types of tools that also help. Sorry, long answer.
No problem. Thanks a lot for that. I think I want to wrap it up with these answers, and thank you a lot for your session. It was great hearing your view on open source and how it's like the first step of making things open source, and we can use more and more things as open source. As teamwork, but then out in the open. That was a great sentence that you used. So thanks a lot for that. And for everybody online viewing, thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. It is one of the sessions of our Disruptive Innovation Festival. We're almost on the end of the 3 weeks of the festival, but we record everything and you can watch everything back on DIF on demand. Just simply go to our website and have a look. We've made navigations. We named them playlists, so you can get a better look on what sessions you want to see. So have a look up there. And that's it for me for now. Thanks a lot, everybody, Seigo and Lars. And see you on another session.